two great announcements today. Pleased to be joined by our Florida Department of Transportation Secretary, Jared Perdue, who people that work in this building know very well. We also have Representatives Robinson and Buchanan from the Sarasota-Bradenton area. Paul Anderson is the CEO of the Port of Tampa Bay. And we also have Mark Mitchell, President of Capital Asphalt. And we're also joined by representatives of Florida Gulf and Atlantic Railroad, as well as CSX Transportation, which, as you might imagine, we're here at Florida Department of Transportation building. These are clearly announcements that are going to touch on transportation and infrastructure, which is really an important part of continuing to have a strong economy. I think most people know by now Florida's economy has been ranked #1 in the nation by both CNBC and U.S. News and World Report. None of them want to rank Florida 1 if they can help it. I mean, it's just the way it is. But the reality is we've really been the place where people have been able to be successful. Since I took office, the national economy has grown by about 11%. Florida's economy has grown by 22%. So we've doubled the GDP growth of the nation as a whole. Of course, we're #1 for new business formations since 2019, as well as #1 for business relocations from companies in other parts of the United States. There used to be governors, and many governors still do this around the country. You know, you'd fly to these places and you'd talk to businesses. Hey, let me tell you about your state. And I did that, like, I think my first year as governor occasionally, some of these cities like Chicago, New York. But then it got to the point, like, businesses would just call us. They'd be like, hey, we want to come. We just don't let the governor know we're going to do it. We'll just give you guys a heads up. And so we've seen a really big movement. And I can tell you, when the businesses move, they generally are glad that they moved. Not too many people saying that they want to get back to Chicago once they make the move to Florida or get back to New York. That's just the way it is. Our unemployment rate has remained below the national average for 46 consecutive months, which we're proud of. We have a GDP of about 1.6 trillion. You know, it varies whether that would be like the 13th most economy if we were our own country, 15th, 18th, but basically there would not be very many countries in the world that have a bigger economy than just Florida if we were our own country. So that's something that's really, really meaningful. Now, we've had to do that in the face of high interest rates, inflation. I mean, some of the things that we've done in terms of infrastructure, we would do it, and then we have to go back and add more to the same projects because of how much more expensive everything is. Supply chains are interrupted, massive amounts of printing money. This has had huge, huge impacts. You know, I'm just like watching some of these things, like, you know, you have a debate, you have like these interviews, and it's like, you know, Harris was there for this. She cast the vote for some of these major spending initiatives that really fueled inflation. And they'll say, well, you know, Vice President Harris, what would you do to lower inflation? And her answer is, I grew up in a middle-class family. Like, what difference does that? I mean, like, so what? That's great. But what would you actually do? And there's nothing that's been said or proffered to make any difference. And when you hear people say things like, oh, the grocery costs have gone up because they're corporate gouging of prices, that is a lie. That is not true. In fact, if one company wanted to gouge on cereal, the competitors would just simply undercut it and they would get more markets. Basic economics. The reason why grocery prices have gone up is because supply chains disruption from the COVID nonsense, the massive amounts of printing and borrowing of money, all the stuff that's happened, that absolutely gets passed on to the consumer in the form of higher prices. It's effectively like a major tax on people. It's just invisible, and it's not the government doing it directly. So that is just the reality. And so we'd have had to navigate that. We've done a lot of things to help folks in a variety of different ways. I mean, we have no tax on any baby items now in Florida for forever. That's the law. So you can get all the diapers you want, the strollers, the cribs, tax-free, which that adds up over the course of a young kid's life. We've also done things like provide toll relief, which the tolls are not necessarily as big an issue in every part of the state, but there's some parts of the state people rack up a lot of tolls every day just to be able to get to work. We did a 50% reduction for all Florida commuters. I don't think anywhere in the country is doing that. In fact, you look at some of the tolls, some of these places in other parts of the country, massive tolls, and then there's potholes in almost every road. It's like, where does that money go? If you're charging people tolls, shouldn't you fix the roads? And yet they don't fix the roads. So we do all that. So we've worked really hard to give people relief. But all that's great. But the fact that we are #1 for business relocations, new business formations, economic growth, all these things, that's meant we've had an increase in the population. And just as I'm not going out, begging businesses to come, we kind of have just created an environment. A lot of them want to come. We're not begging for people to move to Florida. There's some states that run commercials. Hey, please come to our state. We're not doing that. We've got over 23 million people now. We were great when we had 21 and a half. I think we had 21 something when I got elected. Now we're over 23. And but it's a free country, and people do. Now, there's benefits sometimes when people come, for sure, but there also creates some challenges that you have to navigate, particularly making sure the infrastructure can keep up with the growth. And so we saw this, of course, happening many years ago, and decided that just simply, as good as we were doing with our Department of Transportation budget and our agency, and people who drive on our roads compare those to other parts of the country, and they say that we do a better job, and that's great, but we knew that we had to do more to try to get ahead. So we announced Moving Florida Forward a couple years ago, and what Moving Florida Forward was say, okay, we have this commitment to infrastructure, the transportation, the roads, that's great, we'll fund the budget, we'll do all that, but we've got a lot of projects in the hopper that need to be done as soon as possible, and you can't wait 15 or 20 years for some of this, because we got to get ahead of some of the growth, and even just to keep your head above water, you have to do some of that. So we did, through Moving Florida Forward, it'll end up being a total of $7 billion to accelerate projects, move projects forward, and then get them done, when a lot of these projects will get done this decade, and they wouldn't have even started until next decade. Some of the projects are going to be done 15 years ahead of schedule as a result of this commitment. So we believe in being proactive. We believe in trying to get ahead as best we can. I mean, for example, partially through that program, we did $2.5 billion for the lane expansion and interchange reworking along the I-4 corridor, which, if you ever go from here to Orlando, I mean, it's just at any time, when you're, especially between Lakeland and the parks, it's just, you just don't know. So there's going to be major I-4, and the places where they have done that on I-4, it actually has helped a lot. So that'll be a big benefit, and that wasn't even things people were going to talk about doing for a long time. And so those are way ahead of schedule, and then they're fully funded. We also streamline the approval process. We make it easier for construction crews to get the shovels in the ground. Remember, the federal government will say, oh, we're going to do infrastructure. They'll pass something. I mean, what if they spent $20 billion and they've created 6 charging stations with some of this stuff? I mean, it's insane that that's what happens, but it just gets bogged down in bureaucracy and red tape. We cut through the bureaucracy and red tape. We have all our seaports. We're a hub for trade. There's a lot of things that go into that, of course, but this is something that's a major part of our state. We have a lot of the supply chain that runs through the center part of our state. You look at something you'll hear from Paul Anderson, Port of Tampa. Of course, the I-4 corridor, really important to be able to do. There's also a lot of growth in the state. So we are accelerating these projects. We're accelerating the road projects. We know how important it is to be able to do it. And I'll say something about that in one sec. But part of what goes into that is you got to have the materials to be able to build the roads. You got to make sure that you have what you need so that those projects can move forward. So we saw during COVID the interruption in supply chains. I mean, it got to the point, I don't know if you remember, there were just ships waiting in California's coast for days, nowhere to go. We actually said, hey, we're open for business. We had one of the companies move to Jacksonville from Long Beach, and we had other stuff. So we benefited in Florida because I remember they said it was massive ships waiting, and they're like, well, they're going to expand the shifts. They're now going to go to, extended shifts. And I'm like, we always do 24/7. Like, that's just how they run normally. It's just a different culture over there. So we've really been able to capitalize on that, and we're happy. But we also understand, we don't want to be at the mercy of some of these other policies. If we can control our own supply chain or bolster our own supply chain so we can continue to meet the needs of Florida, we want to be able to do that. So during the 23-24 legislative session, the legislature set aside $100 million for a 5-year investment in projects to improve capacity for transporting and storing aggregate materials through what we're calling supply chain grants. And so today I'm proud to announce an award of $18 million in supply chain grants. These awards will total a cumulative $100 million to be invested, of course, over 5 years, but we're doing this right now. So these are going to be grants that are going to be distributed for new aggregate terminals. So, for example, Lake City, which is up near I-10, is going to get a new one. We also have Capital Asphalt from Tallahassee here. They're going to have 80,000 additional tons of aggregate that they're going to be able to do annually as a result of these grants. CSX is going to be underwritten to construct a new aggregate terminal in Plant City, which is not that far from here, to accommodate 20 acres of storage and 250,000 additional tons of aggregate annually. $6.2 million for Port of Tampa Bay. They're going to have Berth 218 aggregate terminal, an additional 500,000 tons of lime rock annually, and then $2.6 million for Jacksport up in Northeast Florida. They are going to have a project to increase rail capacity to accommodate 15 acres of yard storage, an additional 240 tons of aggregate annually. So these are the first 5 recipients. This is going to be 1.2 million additional tons of aggregate storage materials. It will enable more rail access to additional aggregate storage facilities as well. So you want to see projects get done, you want to see things move, got to have the materials to be able to do it. So I appreciate the legislature investing in this. It's not something that is necessarily going to be immediately top of mind. I mean, if you're sitting in traffic, you're not thinking about aggregate materials, right? But it's something that goes in. So we're excited about that. We also are able to announce the groundbreaking. And so if you look at that, that's our aggregate grant map in terms of what we're looking for. And that's bolstering the supply chain right there all across the state of Florida. So really, really positive on that. Now, today we're announcing the groundbreaking for the Fruitville interchange at I-75 in Sarasota County. So this project will transform the existing traditional cloverleaf configuration into a diverging diamond interchange. This redesign will significantly reduce congestion and smooth logistics in the state. Once these improvements are completed, it's predicted that it will increase daily volume capacity by more than 40,000 drivers. So this is so that's what it's going to look like. This is one of our 20 major infrastructure projects under Moving Florida Forward initiative. So this was not scheduled to even begin until the year 2030 under current, and we have robust transportation budgets, 2030. Because of Moving Florida Forward, it will be completed in 2027. So head of schedule, fully funded, and years ahead of where it would even have broken ground originally. So I think this is going to be good. I mean, I drove out from the airport out here. I saw nothing but like stores and construction and all this stuff. I mean, so, you got to be in a situation where you can get ahead. So this is going to be a really good project, one of 20 that we're doing. That, again, most of these would not have even started this decade. Now you're going to finish a lot of them this decade, but at a minimum, finish them years ahead of schedule. So I appreciate what Jared Perdue has done and our folks at the Florida Department of Transportation. We're providing a lot of opportunity to do these projects, and people, when they bid on them, we expect them to do well, and it's great for jobs and all that. I mean, that's not why we're doing it. The government's not a jobs program. We're doing the infrastructure that's needed for folks, but I do think it has a positive economic effect. So we're proud to be able to do this and do it quickly, or as quickly as possible. So with that, we're going to hear from some of our other speakers to talk about some of the things that we've announced today, and we'll start with Jared Perdue, Florida Department of Transportation.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you for your continued leadership. Under the Governor's leadership, we truly have become a worldwide leader in transportation. The Florida legislature continues to prioritize and make the investments that are needed, and it really, truly is setting Florida apart from the rest of the country, the rest of the nation. On top of that, we're continuing to find new innovations, new efficiencies, and really cut through the layers of bureaucracy and red tape that you typically find in government, especially with the federal government, to get things done faster. So thank you for that, Governor. I'm really happy to be here today in our Manatee Operations Center. This is actually DOT's District 1 in Florida. The team here was directly involved in Hurricane Ian response, which was truly incredible. Under the Governor's leadership, it's taken emergency response in the state of Florida to new levels. Hurricane Ian response was a great example of that. And this office was directly involved with the Pine Island, Sanibel Island restoration projects and the debris removal that started happening immediately after that. So thank you for that. So you heard the Governor talk about the Moving Florida Forward initiative. Really proud of that initiative. I mean, the Governor really showed leadership in rolling that out, taking the record general revenue surplus that's been generated in the state of Florida and reinvesting that in each and every one of you through transportation. He truly understands the direct impact it has on quality of life, and it's really remarkable. We've already moved a third of those 20 projects into the construction phase. What we're announcing today is I-75 at Fruitville Road is now going into construction. We're really excited about that. Also in this area, State Road 70 widening from Bourneside Boulevard to Waterbury Road is also beginning construction. So tremendous excitement around that. Those projects are being advanced by many, many years. We couldn't have done it without the Governor's leadership and the legislature's investments in transportation. So with the supply chain, as you know, Governor DeSantis and our legislature have been very focused on the things that are really important to Floridians. Two of those are workforce and supply chain. Both of those are critical to delivering transportation infrastructure, which is why this aggregate grant program is so important to Florida. After the COVID response, there was a huge supply chain disruption nationwide. Aggregate supply became a real issue not only for transportation projects but also for all the residential and commercial construction you see. Aggregate is the main ingredient that goes into both concrete and asphalt. So it's really important that we build out that supply chain and make sure aggregate is available looking 5, 10, 15 years in the future. This $100 million grant program is going to do just that. We're happy to award these first 5 grants at $18 million. It's going to work on aggregate storage facilities, rail infrastructure, rail cargo capacity, and also improvements at ports, which you'll hear from Port Tampa Bay here soon. So it's really an incredible investment, very forward-thinking, really proud of what the Governor's been doing and also our legislature, and we're going to continue to roll this out and prepare for the future. Thank you, Governor.
Okay. Paul?
Thank you very much, Governor, Secretary Perdue, for your continued leadership, your vision, and your commitment to growing the capacity to serve Florida's growth. So we're investing today in tomorrow's growth for the state of Florida. This $6.2 million grant award will be used directly, is already starting to be used for the construction to expand the aggregate imports into Port Tampa Bay. That sector of cargo, we're the largest cargo port in the state of Florida, is our oldest and largest. It has been the foundation for Port Tampa Bay for over 100 years. And it's also the cargo going to be the foundation for the millions and millions of Floridians who will be using these roads, like the Fruitville Exchange, with this aggregate material. It's maybe the last thing people think of when they're thinking of road expansion. Where do those materials come through? This project is a $22 million project which will build a new public berth that has seen heavy congestion previously. We'll expand the berth so bigger, larger, deeper ships can serve Florida. The new capacity for the construction materials will relieve the congestion that we've had. For several of our global companies that use this port. With the grant money awarded, we were actually able to pre-order the materials, Governor, using a direct purchase order, which saved on taxes, and we then could take that additional dollars and stretch the public dollars that we've received through this grant. There will be a 475-foot berth, which will allow almost ships, the companies that are using it, will use almost double the size of the vessels. And I can assure you, Governor, just because they're larger, unlike California, we're going to receive them immediately. But this will also help relieve the construction materials shortages that the state is seeing. 100% of these materials will also be utilized by our great partners at the Florida Department of Transportation road projects throughout the state of Florida. They will include, as we mentioned, aggregate, cement, fly ash, which is used in the mixing of those materials for FDOT projects. This new berth will support and enhance our capabilities to serve the state of Florida, our growing region, and help grow the jobs in our economy. We cannot be thankful enough for the governor's leadership on this and for Secretary Perdue. Thank you, Governor.
On behalf of the legislative delegation, I would normally welcome the governor to Manatee County, but he's been here so much over the past couple years. But in seriousness, you've been with us in tough times, like Hurricane Ian, Piney Point, and most recently Debbie. But you're also here with us in good times, like today. And so we're very thankful that you're committed to this area and certainly with the state. Folks don't maybe know this, but the governor and I were elected on the very same day, 6 years ago or so. And someone snapped a picture of us during organizational session, and actually I looked at it today. One of us, me, has aged a bit more over the last 6 years. But I was thinking back, Governor, all we've accomplished in the legislature and with you. You mentioned COVID and folks coming here because other states were shutting them down. We passed the largest tax cut in the history of the state of Florida. Chair Buchanan worked on that. So we've done so many things over the past 6 years. And as you mentioned, the result of that is folks want to move here. 1,000 people a day coming to Florida. And that presents, as the governor mentioned, some challenges to our water quality, to our education system, and certainly our infrastructure. I'm old enough to remember when I-75 was built. Actually, my father drove me down it. Maybe I should admit this, but I am now. Drove it down it before it was open. It was a different time 40 years ago. And because of your leadership, Governor, streamlining these projects, we know famously about the bridge down south of us that was destroyed during Ian, and you and your team got that done quickly. We can get these infrastructure projects up and off the ground because it's great to have folks coming here every day, but folks that have lived here for generations say, what are we going to do about the traffic and about all the folks that are waiting here? And these infrastructure projects, like the Fruitville infrastructure project, are going to do great things for our area. So I think you're the infrastructure governor. So thank you for what you've done, and we'll continue to do moving forward, Governor. Thank you.
Well, maybe I don't look it, but you know, with when we first took office, we had a 2-year-old and a 9-month-old. Now we've got 7, 6, and 4, and they put us through our paces. And so we work hard on the state, but then my wife and I've got a lot going on back at the house, and we're doing games and this and that and everything, but it's a lot of fun, and we have. But I want to thank the legislature for stepping up and answering the call on this and a wide variety of issues. You will never find a period where you're going to have more productivity than what we've seen here in the state of Florida in recent years. It's just not going to happen. Sometimes when some legislatures get productive, like Minnesota, they end up driving people out of the state because they come to Florida. In fact, a lot of them have been in Sarasota, Bradenton area. I've talked to them for many years now about that. But across the board, hitting on so many different things, it's really good. And that's when you're doing this. I mean, look, some people run for office and want to be in office just to kind of get to be a show horse and to do whatever that's not necessarily substantive. And then other folks get in. It's like, okay, you're going to do this. You're in for a limited time. What are you going to have to show for it? Are you going to have things that are going to be, lasting achievements? And clearly, the legislature has been able to do things that have been significant, are going to continue to be significant. Whether it's this infrastructure stuff, which was, we have massive surplus in the state of Florida. We have, when I became governor, our rainy day fund, I think we've tripled it since I became governor. In fact, we can only put a few $100 million more in it, and then by law they say you can't put any more in because it's too much, because it's a relatively decent chunk of the budget compared, under the statute. So you have that, but we've had big surplus. So we have an ability to cut taxes. We have an ability to raise teacher salaries. We have an ability to do what we've done on infrastructure. Now, part of it is we've also vetoed money that's come in when you got to make choices. There's some things government should not do, and that's an easy veto, right? There's some things that may be nice to have but not essential, and you got to make judgments on that. And then there's some things that are essential or that really are necessary. So you kind of make those decisions. But I think in the process of us having vetoed, we've probably vetoed. The record before I became governor was $800 million. We did 1 year $3.3 billion in vetoes. So that money goes basically into the bucket, not spent, and so that builds up your reserves. And part of the reason we've been able to do a lot of that stuff is because we've really built those reserves over the years. And I don't know what's going to happen with the economy. You see definitely some signs. I know the Fed cut interest rates. I guess they're going to do it again in November. But quite frankly, they've botched this from the beginning of COVID. And so they kind of put us in, we're large reason we're in the mess in addition to the Congress and the borrowing and the spending. But so I don't know what's going to happen. I know we're doing better than the rest of the country. I think we'll continue to do that. But who knows what's on the horizon? If you get somebody like Harris tries to tax unrealized gains, this country will go into a depression. I can tell you that. You'd see a massive flight of capital out of the United States, and I think that would hurt our state in particular. It's lunacy to say you're going to tax someone's investment before they've even realized a profit on it. They just have to cut a check every year it goes up, and if it goes down, they don't get their money back. That is insane to be able to introducing that principle into the economy, and they'll say, oh, it's only for wealthy people. Yeah, you know what? When the income tax was put in, they said it was only for wealthy. They said it was only for Carnegie and Rockefeller, and yet now people that work, everyday jobs pay income tax. So it is really, really dangerous in some of the things that are being discussed. But nevertheless, we're in a situation where because we've built up the rainy day fund, the reserves, the surplus, all this stuff, if something happens in the national economy, we see a change in revenue, we don't have to stop doing Moving Florida Forward. We don't have to stop teacher pay increases. We don't have to stop supporting our natural resource, everything we've done with the Everglades and all the other stuff. All we do is just move a little bit money from reserve and put it in where it needs to be. If there's any type of shortfall, that's a good position to be in. In fact, my first year as governor, the legislature would always say, well, we really strive to have $1 billion left over in general revenue, and I think we've had typically 10 times that much left over in the last few years with the budget, and it ends up growing throughout the year because we get more revenue in that's coming. So all that being said, I think there's been a lot of great work in Florida. The fact that we're here accelerating projects. The thing about it is we have a good transportation budget. There's a lot of states around the country that look to Florida in terms of how we do that. These projects are kind of laid out. There's a priority. Then they knock them out. We could have very easily just said, "Oh yeah, we're going to keep funding the transportation budget. We'll get to that. It's in the queue. I know you guys are sitting in traffic, but yeah, it's in the queue. It's going to happen someday." And could have just said that, and then next decade the traffic's worse and it hasn't even started. That wasn't acceptable for us. So we went over and above with it's going to be a total of $7 billion to accelerate these projects. And guess what? Did that require a tax increase on anybody? No, nothing. It's just us doing what we think is right. So I'm proud of that. We'll also just say, just because it happened in the state of Florida last night down in Miami at the baseball game, you have Shohei Ohtani. If you guys watch that highlights from yesterday, I don't think you're going to ever see a performance like that. I think he went 6 for 6, hit 3 home runs, which is good enough. Obviously, you could play career and never do that. But he qualified, or he's the first player in Major League history to have 50 home runs and 50 stolen bases in the same season. And I remember when they did 30-30, then that was a big deal however many decades ago. It's like, oh my gosh, 30-30. And then the question was, could you ever have someone do 40-40? And it was like, you don't know if you could do it. And I remember a couple guys did it, and that was like a huge, huge deal. But I don't think in those days it was even under consideration that someone would possibly be able to do 50-50. And he was doing that. He did it last night in Miami. I mean, obviously, you would not want to be on the other side of that if you're the Marlins, but it did happen in the state of Florida, and that will be a game that goes down in baseball history. So we were, I mean, really stunned to see how he was able to do. And then we're also happy that we have our Tampa Bay Bucks are 2-0, and that's a great way to start the season. So we'll root for the best this weekend coming up in the game. So thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.